Really exciting updates in the security space this Cisco Live. So I'm sat down with Rob, who's going to talk us through a couple of his key highlights.
So this year at Cisco Live, there's been some really interesting conversations around platform and some interesting conversations around the tech that supports it. You've got the future-proof workplaces where effectively they're talking about how you universally align ZTNA rather than just ubiquitous ZTNA, which is quite a different take on things. They're also talking about AI-ready data centers, so that you're looking at your segmentation and firewalls, and then you've got your AI-ready defense. So how they're going to support that is with three main tech areas. So their really interesting one this year is around what they're calling a hybrid mesh firewall. So traditionally what you'd have in my world would be what they call a firewall sandwich. You have this idea of egress switches, then you have your pair of HA firewalls, and then you have your ingress switches. And that's a really, really complicated design, both in terms of the amount of time it takes to set up, troubleshooting, as you can imagine, cost. So what they're coming up with the idea is that instead of having this idea of switch, firewall, switch, you actually just have a switch with the ports that are enabled at a firewall level. So in its essence, every switch port becomes a firewall. So that's really interesting because not only does that get away with a really complicated design, but it actually streamlines how you apply technology to every different asset of an application or a flow of information going through at the port level. That might throw up some interesting things around management perspectives, because before you'd have two devices you're trying to manage, but now, as you can imagine, on a switch, you're talking about 24 different instances of firewalls. So they've got this new concept of a cloud control platform where they're going to try to automate policy. And that's going to become really interesting because you can imagine automation and policy might be a bit difficult to trust. So I think the concept is we're going to allow you to almost tick box a suggestion. So rather than just auto allowing a policy to be created, here's what they suggest. Do you want to approve it, yes or no? And I think the analogy would be when you first got your iPhone, did you automatically trust an update? You probably back it up and then you would apply the update just in case something went wrong. So the same concept here. You would have the idea to apply policy, and then you still have that human interaction to say yes or no. And then over time, the trust comes into it. And this kind of leads into the idea of segmentation in the AI-ready data centers. Is sometimes when you're trying to have a scenario where you're having a vulnerability, the patching takes quite a long time to actually come out and implement. So what if you could have compensated controls near the source or the port layer to be able to apply that temporary fix to be able to deny certain ports over certain applications, and then in the background have the patching come out, but you can kind of control when the patch comes in, and you have these compensated controls, and then when you apply the patch, let's say a month or two later, you can lift that policy and delete it, and now you've got the vulnerability resolved. So that's quite interesting. And then the last one is this concept of AI defense. So AI defense is interesting because at the minute, there's nothing really out there that allows you to apply controls over the policy of large language models. So we heard from Ian yesterday talking about how the deployment of these new models that are coming out, sometimes it's, well, how do you control them from a standardization point of view, as in, can you validate that large language model? And then how do you apply compensating controls? So these are all ideas around how you can look to leverage Cisco security service in a platform perspective as an overarching layer to apply controls to their kind of platform. So that's kind of interesting from my perspective, but I think the key is how do you manage that? And I think that's where the challenge will be. And I think it's going to be a trust exercise over the next couple of 6 to 12 months to see how that goes. And that'll be interesting from my perspective.
No, that's really, really good. Thank you so much for going through those things. There's a lot to think about. And if you want any more information, pop over to natilik.com and we'll be sure to help. Thank you. I don't know what happened. That